Um, what we're going to talk about today is the Civil War, and a very interesting part of our history. I think it's misinterpreted by a lot of people today, and it's kind of why a lot of things are going wrong. And what I want to tell you is I learned something by teaching out of a thick book of textbook of American literature juxtaposed to each other. I was teaching Lincoln's Gettysburg Address next to Robert E. Lee, General Robert E. Lee's letter to his son. And what I learned from those two documents was that if Robert E. Lee had been born and lived in Maryland instead of Virginia, which are like right next to each other, and Washington's in between, the Civil War would have been a short skirmish, and that would have been it. Now, here's why. Robert E. Lee, General Robert E. Lee, was the greatest general, arguably, who ever lived. He was amazing. And he also had other generals fighting for him for the South. And the thing is, what he was interested in having happen was that the states remain united. That's what I learned from his letter to his son. And that was what Lincoln wanted as well, of course, was for the Union to stay united. So they were basically on the same page with that. And like I say, if he'd been born in Maryland, he would have been fighting for the North. And but he was born in Virginia, so he was fighting for the South. He was true to his Commonwealth of Virginia, and there you go. So here's the thing. Lincoln kept choosing generals for the North side, and they kept getting hammered by Lee's people. And Lincoln would fire the general for losing and try another one. He would lose, try another one, and he would lose. Lee just kept chewing him up. And also Stonewall Jackson, also a very interesting person in history, is the Gray Ghost, John Singleton Mosby, who he was a guerrilla fighter and would like be in the woods with like 100-man cavalry, and he would like run out and like work out on 1,000 men and then basically best them and then go back and get away. He was brilliant. And sidelight is that actually Mosby, the Gray Ghost, survived the war and ended up in California, living out his life as an older man. And he had a young boy who he would tell us war stories to. And that young boy turned out to be George S. Patton, the World War II tank genius. So that's kind of interesting, but that's a sidelight. We're talking about the Civil War. So basically, the Union was getting killed off by Lee's wonderful tactics, and finally what Lincoln settled on was Ulysses S. Grant as the boss. And Ulysses S. Grant had an attitude, okay? I've heard it said that Ulysses S. Grant knew two tunes. One was Yankee Doodle and the other wasn't. So he was a very opinionated person, and apparently drank a lot of whiskey. But anyway, That was common in those days. And actually, they used to use whiskey as the what do you call it? An anesthesia when they were cutting your leg off in the military hospital tent, and your leg was all mangled, and you'd have to have it cut off because they didn't have what they have now, and they would give you like several slugs of whiskey and then cut your leg off, and it was like, what? But anyway, so the thing was, as time went on, Ulysses S. Grant did better against, because he basically would throw it all at you. And also, see, the North owned all the factories where all the stuff of war was being made. Uniforms, bullets, guns, shoes, everything was done in the factories. Now the South, basically they were agrarian, they were farmers, they were actually cotton people, as you know. They had cotton fields. So anyway, that's where the cloth would come from, but cloth doesn't stop bullets, man. And basically when the bullets started running out for the South and the guns started wearing out for the South, and they didn't have factories to make more, and so that started happening to them, is they were running short of supplies. And what Grant decided to do as a tactic was he sent one of his under generals, Sherman, and he had him make a march to the sea. It was known as Sherman's March to the Sea. And what he did was he started in one of the western southern states and just took all his men, and they burned everything. They burned the, what do they call those things? Plantation houses. They burned the cotton fields. All the cotton was on fire. They killed everybody the whole way through. They burned the whole city of Atlanta. If you want to see that in film, look at the old movie Gone with the Wind. And that's what's happening during part of that movie, is Sherman is burning Atlanta. And he went all the way to the sea, burning everything. And here was the South. They're out of supplies, they were out of ammunition, they were out of guns, they didn't have shoes, they were up the creek, man, and everything was burned. It didn't matter who was picking the cotton, there wasn't any cotton, it was all burned. So well, the other thing is, see, Lincoln had to worry about all the states. He was the president of the United States, all of them. And I learned from Steven Spielberg's movie Lincoln, in which Daniel Day-Lewis does a real nice job of playing Lincoln. I was surprised how good he did. But anyway, apparently Lincoln wanted the Emancipation Proclamation, and he wanted it before the war was over, and he got it before the war was over, and everybody was voting on it, the southern states included, in the Senate and the House of Representatives. Watch that movie if you want to see how hard that was for him to do, and he did it before the end of the war, which is really cool. And even him getting reelected and all that didn't matter to him. What mattered to him was the Emancipation Proclamation. So anyway, I'll close this with when Lee finally said, listen, man, we're done. You're just killing all of us, and we can't do anything about it, even with me. And so he met with Ulysses S. Grant, the first time they ever physically met, actually, eye to eye at Appomattox Courthouse. And Lee signed the surrender and was giving the sign of that was to give him Grant his sword. That was the symbolic surrender of here's my sword, you're in control, not me. I surrender. Ulysses S. Grant would not accept General Robert E. Lee's sword. He said, no, no, General Lee, you're the best. I'm not taking your sword from you, man. I respect you too much. And I think that's pretty beautiful. Now the other thing is, this was not about slavery. I'll have a whole other one on slavery, okay? But I want you to think about whether you really want to tear down those statues for Robert E. Lee and what he did, and Stonewall Jackson, and I don't know if they have any Mosby stuff. You know, it's history, and it's pretty beautiful history, actually. A lot of heroism on both sides of the coin, and so think about it. I'm thinking about it, and so hope that was interesting. I'm going to say goodbye. This is Sirius Black. At the Bureau of Poetic Justice, and be back at you soon. Bye.